We welcome in from Fox Sports, Troy Aikman. Troy, welcome. How are you?
Hey, Mike. I'm doing well. Thank you.
All right, Troy. Let's start with let's start with tonight's game in Chicago. And, you know, we're singing the same song about the Giants that we've been singing week after week. And now the Bears have lost a couple in a row. Your thoughts about tonight's game?
Well, you know, hey, we had the Bears last week, and they hung in there early on. Did some good things, especially defensively, and keeping the Saints out of the end zone. But then it just became too much for them. You know, right now I don't know that the defense for the Bears. I don't know how well they can hold up if they're not getting takeaways, and they failed to do that against the Saints. And I think more of the burden has to be put on the Bears, the Bears offense. But, you know, this game, I keep thinking each week that, okay, this is going to be the time that the Giants kind of get it going, and I've been surprised when they haven't done that. So I just think as far as, you know, where these two teams are right now emotionally and, at the point in the season, I probably like the Bears in this game.
Do you see anything from the Bears that would tell you they were going to be a playoff team this year?
I think they've got a chance. You look at that division, Green Bay. They've come out. They've stumbled a little bit from where we thought they would be. The Bears have already lost to the Lions, but yeah, I think they're capable of making it to the playoffs. I think that their situation at quarterback with Cutler is still somewhat a work in progress in terms of what Trestman wants him doing and then him going out and executing that plan. He did a pretty good job of that through the first 3 weeks. They won those games. The game against Detroit, he did not play as well, and they ended up losing. And that's kind of the story. In the past, the defense was able to overcome a quarterback, not necessarily Cutler, but a quarterback that didn't play particularly well. But I just don't think that defense is as dominant as they once were, that it takes Cutler playing well. It takes him playing really good football, which is the case for most teams. But more so now in Chicago than it's ever been.
Are you ready to elevate the Saints to Super Bowl status, that kind of level?
I like that team a lot. I could see, I like Seattle. I still think Green Bay is going to make a run. But do I like New Orleans? I like them a lot. I think Sean Payton is as good as anybody in football. I think he's got just a great blend of football smarts, being tough, and then also knowing how to have a good time. I mean, I don't know if you heard, but after the game, when the team loaded the bus, after their win in Chicago, he took 2 laps around Soldier Field, celebrating it. People don't do that, And I know one game they were in Dallas years ago, and after he had left the Cowboys and was then the head coach at New Orleans, they beat Dallas, and they did a victory lap when they were flying home over Texas Stadium, So guys respond to that. I like what Rob Ryan is doing defensively. He's brought a real attitude, a lot like what Greg Williams did. So these guys are playing well, and I don't see that stopping. They're starting to gain some momentum, and I believe, even though they're in a tough game this week, and we'll be calling that game against the Patriots. Patriots have struggled a little bit. I think the Saints are going to get them all they want.
We're talking with Troy Aikman about what's going on in especially the NFC right now. Seahawks finally got beat last week in Indianapolis, got brought down to life a little bit. The Niners have picked it up a little bit, won a big game against Houston. Those two, and we've watched Atlanta to sink slowly into the East here and have gone away now, especially with the injuries to their season. So the balance of power clearly resides out west right now, and then you have New Orleans. So right now, I guess you replace Atlanta with New Orleans, and that's your big three in the NFC.
I think so. Yeah, I think now it usually takes 4 or 5 games before teams really start to separate themselves from the pack. I think those teams have. San Francisco has been a little up and down. They as you mentioned, a really nice win for them. And then, transitioning to the AFC, where's Houston? What's going to happen to them?
Boy, that's a big problem.
I mean, it's crazy what's going on there. But yeah, I like those teams in the NFC, and I expect them certainly to be contending when we move into January, and my bet would be one of those teams are going to be representing the NFC in the Super Bowl.
I saved the Cowboys because, let's be honest, and I've sat here and told people Romo's a lot better than he gets credit for, and he played as well as you can possibly play, but, I mean, he is haunted. I mean, he played a perfect game. He played as well as you could possibly play the position, and then he made a bad pass late in the game, and it cost his team. And again, and everyone's going to dwell on the one mistake and not the 25 for 36 for 506 for 5 touchdowns. I mean, an incredible performance, and then the deadly error, the deadly mistake that continues to plague and haunt his career.
Yeah, I just think that was a game that wherever you stand on Tony Romo, that was a game that supports, your opinion, whether it's that, hey, the team wouldn't have been in the game if it hadn't have been for Romo, and look how well he played, to the cynic who says, hey, he can't finish, he never makes the play late in the game, with the interception. And I hated to see it for him. Certainly, knew the backlash that was going to come from that. Unfortunately, most people recognize this, but you score 48 points.
You got to win.
That game should have been over in the third quarter.
You got to win. If you score 48 points, you got to walk off the field a winner. You have to.
Yeah, it shouldn't. You shouldn't be. Every throw shouldn't be that critical with 2.5 minutes to play when you've scored 48 points. But having said that, that's the situation of the game. Peyton Manning. He was down 7, and he took him down and tied it and was able to make the throws. He had an interception, although his was earlier in the ball game and not, then in the fourth quarter. And, so it's just, and unfortunately, it's one of those situations for Tony. I still believe he's an amazing quarterback, a terrific talent. But until you do it, then, if you say he can't do it, then you're right. That's the way it is for every quarterback until ultimately you go out and win. They were saying that about Peyton Manning at one time, as hard as that is to believe.
Do you take the good from that game? I mean, if you're his teammate in that game, do you take the good in that game, or do you take the 58 minutes of good or the 2 minutes of bad in that game?
It's a good question, Mike, and I don't really have the answer to that, primarily because, we know what players say, but what players say isn't always really what they feel. And I think that, it probably varies depending on which player you talk to. But the reason that I say it's hard to know is because it depends on what that relationship is like, what Tony's relationship is like with the other 52 players in the locker room. And if he's cultivated those relationships and he shows those players that, he's all in and he's doing all that he can to win games each and every day and putting the time in, then I think players will look at that performance last week and say, man, what more could the guy have done? We let him down. On the other hand, if you don't and you alienate yourself from the rest of those guys in the locker room, then people don't tend to side with you too much. So I'm sure, based on what I know, I'm not trying to suggest I know anything, but based on what I know, I would think that the players are very supportive of Tony in that locker room.
Yeah, I mean, it just shows you sometimes. And players are always, as the quarterback goes, look at Houston right now. I mean, they were a team that was this close to a Super Bowl. And now, there's a real question of whether Schaub's going to even stay as their quarterback. It's really reached that stage where your position can disintegrate that much and you can look like maybe that you are headed to the bench. He almost looks like he wants to go to the bench sometimes the way he's playing. It's crazy what's going on there. So it really can spiral for a quarterback.
Well, it can when you put together, consecutive games like he has, and then if you're Gary Kubiak or any head coach, you're left with really having to make a decision, because if it was any other position, and we all recognize that the quarterback is not treated the same as every other position, but if it was another position that was struggling, that player would be taken out of the lineup.
Yep.
And so you walk a fine line, and you really, I think, as the head coach, are constantly kind of checking everyone's temperature as to, okay, are they still supporting the quarterback? Do they think that he's the reason that we're not doing more and that we've lost these games? And, are they starting to show outward signs of frustration? And if they are, then you're almost forced as a head coach to make some moves. And, I don't know exactly. I haven't heard what's going to happen this week. I haven't heard that.
Yeah, he's starting. He's starting for sure. They announced it now. He's starting, but you could tell he said the coach said it was a very difficult decision when he said it. So that's rough by just that,
Yeah. So, hey, Matt Schaub better go out and play well this week.
Yeah, no more pick sixes.
It won't be a hard decision next week.
I mean, 4 straight games of pick sixes. That's crazy stuff. I mean,
unbelievable.
I've never seen anything. And boy, oh boy, I mean, that's just you really are looking for the bench. I mean, there's no question about it.
That's not a good way to endear yourself to your defensive teammates. I'll promise you.
Yeah, without any question. When you look at this, the landscape here, and we get this far into the season, these are usually the next 3 or 4 weeks where we kind of separate the men from the boys. It looks like we have started to do that already in the NFC. When you're Atlanta and you're going to go through this, how do you – and even Eli's going through this, and Roethlisberger's going through this. They're not going to have big seasons. None of those guys. Matt Ryan, not Eli, not Roethlisberger. It's got to be hard for these guys who have been to the Super Bowl, who have had a lot of success, to live through these seasons knowing there's nothing good really going to come out of this season, but you got a lot of season left to play.
Well, that's the hard part is knowing where you're at right now in the season, as you said, and the likelihood of being able to salvage anything within it is next to nil. And but yeah, you've got to go out there. You've got to be a professional. You've got to be the leader of the franchise and hold everyone accountable. And, we've seen teams that have rallied from behind. The one that comes to mind is Bill Parcells' Jets team.
Yep.
They were out of it. There were high expectations. They were in the championship game the year before. And in some ways that was maybe his best coaching job. And, and so all of these coaches, they all have pride. All these players do. But it's hard to go out there each week and prepare the way that you have to give yourself a chance to have success when you know that, gosh, we haven't even gotten to Halloween yet and the season's virtually over. I mean, in New England, you've got an offense that has been struggling and a team that's been, inconsistent, yet they're 4-1. I mean, Tom Brady's not having a whole lot of fun there in New England, but at least, their season's still way out in front of them and they're finding at least ways to win games until last week. So, far different from some of these other great quarterbacks that have achieved a lot. When you look at Eli and then Ben Roethlisberger, and those guys have won Super Bowls.
And even for Matt Ryan, I mean, they were expecting big things this year. Gonzalez comes back to go to the Super Bowl. They now they're already 1-4. They got a 5-0 team in their division, and they lose Roddy White and Julio Jones already. I mean, that's going to be a rough way to go now at 1-4 with those guys out of the lineup.
Yeah, I really do hate it for Tony Gonzalez. And, hey, that's what you sign up for. There are no guarantees. He decided to come back. I'm glad he did. He's been a great ambassador to the league. He's a stand-up guy. He's a great player. So I was one who was hoping he'd come back and play, and he did. But then to come back and have this be his final season and to go through the year that they're having, I hate that. I hate that for him because last year, even though they didn't make it to the Super Bowl, it was such a great year, and to get it to the championship game would have been a nice way to go out.
Without any question. All right, we'll chat next week. Thanks, I appreciate it.
Okay.
We'll talk. Thank you very much, Troy.
Thank you, Mike.